through the storm, my God, He is strong. My Savior, Redeemer, my Father, my Healer, my God, my Rock, You are strong. My fortress, my defender, in storms of night, my deliverer, my God, my Rock, Lord, You are strong. You are strong. You're strong. Yes, God. Yes, Lord. Have you ever been alone, broken down without a home? Have you ever been dismayed? Well, He is strong. He is strong. And have you ever felt the weight of sin that burdens, sin that hates? Have you ever been ashamed? Well, He is strong, yes, He is strong. In the midst of the storm, my God, He is strong. My Savior, Redeemer, my Father, You're my Healer, my God, my Rock, Lord, You are strong. Yes, my fortress, my defender, in storms of night, my deliverer, my God, my Rock, You are strong. You are strong forever, stronger in the fight, stronger in the sorrow, stronger in the fight, stronger in tomorrow, stronger in today, stronger in my weakness, stronger all the ways. Who holds the world in His hands? My God saves, my God saves. Who holds the world in His hands? My God saves, my God saves. Yes, my Savior, Redeemer, my Father, my Healer, my God, my Rock, You are strong. My fortress, my defender, in storms of night, my deliverer, my God, my Rock, Lord, You are strong. You are strong. You are strong. Lord, You are strong. Lord, You are strong. Yes, You're stronger. You're stronger. In my hopeless nights, You're stronger. You're stronger. Lord, You are
Well, good morning again, everyone. Go ahead and have a seat. We're so happy that you're here with us. Hey, can we just give a round of applause to our Regen youth leading worship this morning? Absolutely incredible. It's so awesome to see the next generation coming up and serving. There is so much talent here at Loma Linda University Church, and it's just incredible to see all the talent. And these guys are amazing. They've put in so much time this morning to lead here for the first time. Just excited from what's to come from that. So we're so excited for that. We want to welcome you. If this is your first time here, we especially want to welcome you. Go ahead, if you feel comfortable, go ahead, raise your hand if this is your very first time here. Everyone's okay. All right, this is good. We want to welcome you guys. If you want to learn more about Anthem or get involved in our ministry here, you can go out to our Growing Disciples Center where you can learn more. You can connect with myself, Pastor Jesse. We'd love to connect with you and pray with you. At this time, we want to give you the opportunity to give, to partner with Anthem financially. This gives us the opportunity to continue doing the ministry that we're doing. And so you can do that a couple different ways. You can text Anthem Connect to this number, 55498. You can text that number and you'll be able to give. You can select Anthem and you can give there. As well, if you're one of those people that still carries cash, we have someone that will come down the aisle, one of our volunteers, and you can give that way. And anything is so much appreciated. Well, as you know, there's a lot that happens here on this campus. And we want to tell you just about a couple of those things. First of all, our young adult ministry, Praxis, meets here every Friday night. They met here last Friday night. They have an exciting Praxis Christmas banquet coming up on December 3. It's going to be in the Fellowship Hall at 6 p.m. So if you are a young adult, make sure to attend that Christmas banquet. That's just an awesome opportunity just to continue to connect with this community here at Loma Linda University Church. Another thing that I want to let you know about that we are excited about on May 19 and 20. Now, this is a long ways away. You're probably wondering, why am I talking about May 19 and 20? Well, we are launching our very first ever Worship and Creative Conference right here at Anthem. And we're excited to be doing this because we believe that we want to pour into the next generation. We want to pour into those who are doing ministry. We want to pour into leaders and dreamers. And so we are hosting a conference right here on May 19 and 20 for those people. And maybe you're one of those people. We're going to have incredible speakers, Ruben Rios, Ben Lundquist coming out. We have workshops from Pastor Randy, learning how to craft a sermon. We're going to have workshops on learning how to lead worship, how to play drums, how to sing, how to run social media for your church. We have this is going to be an incredible conference. And if you want to be involved in that, you can scan the QR code right here. It's only $35, which is an incredible price for a conference. It's going to be lunch provided. So we'd encourage you to join with us in this amazing opportunity. The last thing that I want to let you know about before we transition into our message is our Christmas service. Did you know that Christmas Eve, the 24th, happens to be Sabbath, happens to be Saturday? And so we want to celebrate that together as an Anthem family on December 24. We're going to be meeting here the same usual times, 10 o'clock and 11:30. We're going to be having a special Christmas service. We're going to be having breakfast refreshments out after the service. So it's going to be a special time. Bring your family and your friends, and we're going to be talking about that now as we enter the Christmas season. And so happy almost Thanksgiving to you. We're almost there. Happy almost American Thanksgiving to you. I already celebrated my Thanksgiving. And so we have been in this covenant series, and it has been such a blessing. Pastor Randy has been such a blessing here as he's been sharing this. So we're going to dive into the Word. So pull out your phones, your Bibles, your notebooks, whatever it is that you take out as we engage in the Word. So let's invite Pastor Randy up.
Morning. Good to see each of you today. Delighted to be together. It's a wonderful day out there. It's a wonderful day in here. So as you know, we've been, as Pastor Josh said, in this series entitled Covenant, Lessons for Families. We've been talking about the Balswick Theological Model for Family Relationships that includes 4 concepts. I'm not going to write all of them on the board today because I'm afraid we're going to run out of room on the board, but I'll remind you of them. They are covenant, grace, empowerment, and intimacy. And it is that last one that interests me today. This one called intimacy. So intimacy has been defined in probably many ways, but one of the definitions that I've appreciated of intimacy is that intimacy is the reality of being able to be open with another person without the need to change the other person. Because that frees you to experience, to explore, and to enjoy the other person, not to manipulate, coerce, and change them. It's a very vulnerable kind of reality, but when we're able to be truly open, it can be transformative. So our question, the question we've been asking in recent weeks is, how do each of these concepts, covenant, grace, empowerment, and today intimacy, how do they play themselves out in a family, in a marriage, in the contemporary world? So if we're talking about a marriage, then we would have to say that probably the most common answer you would get to that in different kinds of sources would be, look in the bedroom to see how intimate the couple is. Now, there's some reasons why that can be a good barometer, but I'm going to argue that that is definitely not the best barometer of intimacy. I don't mean in any way to diminish the importance of sex and sexuality. In fact, I think if you go to Scripture, you'll find that there are probably at least 4 reasons, sexually speaking, for sex in the Bible. One of them is bonding. The two become one flesh. A second one is pleasure. Just go to the book Song of Songs and read it with a commentary nearby so you can sort through some of the ancient metaphors, and you'll see that's very much at the heart of that book. A third one is procreation. This is not in any particular order. Multiply and replenish the earth, or multiply and fill the earth. I think we've done a reasonably good job of that. And then finally is intimacy. They were both naked and not ashamed. So that one is clearly a part of what the Bible has in mind when it comes to sexuality. So it's clearly a part of what it means to be intimate in that marital relationship between the spouses. The question, though, is that the best way to both pursue and to measure the level of intimacy a couple has? I don't think it is. This doesn't come just from me by any means, but I think the best way is to ask about what is happening in the couple's life of communication. In that sense, you can broaden that to many different kinds of relationships. How open are we able to be? How much are we able to listen to and hear each other? How well do we communicate? It was for this reason that Bill Lovelace, the former pastor here at Loma Linda University Church, who had a profound influence on my life, said a couple of things that have stayed with me over all the years. It is drawing on this concept that caused Bill to say the human organ of intimacy is the ear. How well do you hear each other? And also drawing on this concept, Bill said, marriage is tough. Marriage is hard. You have to work on it. And in marriage, this is how work is spelled. T-A-L-K. When you are talking, you're working on it. That's the work of marriage. That's what builds intimacy. Effective communication, effective speaking and listening. So one of the things we've been trying to do throughout this series is to take the principles that we find emerging from Scripture in terms of God's treatment of His, what we've called family, His people, to say, how does God treat His people? And that then can become a guiding star for us in terms of how to interact with our own families. Well, right out of the starting gate, a passage that I read last week, Genesis 2:18, that describes that moment. The writer's describing the moment when God is talking about Adam, who stands alone at this point and needing someone else. And this is what it says. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good." First time He said not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner. So 2 things. First of all, we are created, we are designed, we are wired for relationship, even deep, enduring, permanent relationship of depth. And secondly, that relationship is intended to be a partnership. Not one over and one under, but a partnership. Now, if that's the reality, then we immediately know that the ability to communicate becomes very important. So how does that happen in Scripture? If we're using God and God's family as a model, what happens? Well, there are many places we could turn to in this book to find out how God communicates. I have no place that I like better, though, for that issue than John 13 to 17. It's the last night of Jesus' life. In his conversation with his disciples, you see Jesus' heart on display more openly, more clearly, more vulnerably, maybe than any other place in his life and maybe than any other place in Scripture. It's in that passage, in those chapters, that you hear him saying things to the disciples like, love each other. Love each other, because when you love each other, everybody will know you belong to me. I can see, he says, that you're troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Yes, I'm going away, but I'll come back and I'll get you and I'll bring you to be with myself. And by the way, he says, I'm not going to leave you orphans. You're not going to be orphaned and alone. I'll send you a comforter to be with you. And that comforter will continue to lead you and to guide you. He'll tell you things that I can't tell you right now because you're not yet ready for them. But I'll be with you through the comforter. So just abide in me. Stay connected to me. In fact, he says, my ideal for this family is that you and I abide in each other, and then we abide in the Father in us, and our family will be as one. And then he finishes it in John 17 by an entire chapter of praying. We've often called the Lord's Prayer Our Father who art in heaven. This is really the Lord's Prayer. This is where he prays for himself, he prays for his disciples, and he prays for us. And when he does that, you know what the burden of his prayer is? Father, I want all of us to be one. It's just like my mother used to say, when we would all come home from college for Christmas and we were all under one roof, she would say, now I can sleep well tonight because I know we're all here together. That's what Jesus is praying. I want to be together. That's my heart. That's my soul, Father. Please make that possible. You see his heart on display in those chapters like nowhere else in the Bible. It's intimate. It's open. He makes himself vulnerable. Because the truth is, a lot of the answer to that prayer and to his words lies within our power. We can say, no, I'm not interested. Or we can step into it and pick it up and say, Jesus, I can tell this is precious to you, and because of that, it will become precious to me. So that's where you see God seeking intimacy with his people, Jesus seeking intimacy with his family. It's powerful. What about the other way? What about from us as human beings and what we want from God? Well, again, there are many places in the Bible where we could go to look for that. Maybe my favorite is Psalm 139. If I were naming the Psalms, I would name Psalm 139, He Knows My Name. Because for 22 verses, the psalmist goes on in poetic terminology describing how God knows everything about him. He's just saying, God, you know everything, my coming, my going, from when I began to when I will end. All my life is open before you. You know it all, God. But then at the end of the psalm, the last two verses, even having said all of that, this is what he ends up saying. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. It amazes me that after all that he has said about God knowing him, he ends up saying, but God, I want you to know me even more. I'm throwing open the chambers of my soul. I stand before you with a naked soul so that you can know me so well. You can tell me things about me that I don't even know. It's that yearning for intimacy, to know and to be known. In God's family, it's profound from both sides. And it is made known by words. Jesus and his words from John 13 to 17, the psalmist and his words throughout Psalm 139, their communication, their talking, their conversation is deepening their intimacy. So when it comes to us, how do we know whether or not we have intimacy? I'm going to suggest it's by how effective, how open, how vulnerable our conversation, our communication is. So I want to suggest 3 ways, both to measure how well you're doing and also to deepen the intimacy that you already experience. And in order to do this, we're going to go back to the Proverbs. Now, I go back to the Proverbs because, as we've already discovered in this series, if you're looking to this book to give you a proof text approach to how to do marriage, you're going to end up in some strange places. It has to be more than a proof text approach. It has to be a theological approach. But it can also be going to a book like the book of Proverbs and saying, here is wisdom that was written for all of life. But maybe some of the lessons that emerge can apply to marriage. It's not specifically written to marriage in the cases we look at, but it does have wisdom that can apply in marriage. And so, what we want to do is talk about 3 areas of focus in our lives of communication if we want to deepen our intimacy. So the first focus, if we want to deepen our intimacy, the first focus is on listening. If you want a deeper level of intimacy between siblings, between parent and child, between grandparent and grandson or daughter, if you want a deeper level of intimacy between spouses, you're going to have to listen. Now listen to this proverb taken out of Proverbs 18. All of these will come out of the 18th chapter of Proverbs. Proverbs 18:13 in the New Living Translation says this: spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. How tempting is that? I've had more of those moments than I care to admit to. Those moments when I knew I was right, I knew the situation, I didn't want to listen, I just wanted to spout off and say, this is how it is. And yet, what the wise writer is saying is, if you want to live a wise life, learn to listen before you go spouting off. Now, listening is hard. It's difficult. I read a writer this week who said, I so much prefer to talk. He said, for me, talking is like eating a cinnamon roll. Listening is like doing squats. I hate it. I want to talk, not listen. Because most of us want to get what we think, what we feel, what we believe, our perspective out there. You listen to me. Rather than being to say, okay, I don't want to spout off before listening. So Tim Keller was a church planter. He was planting a church in Manhattan, and he had made an agreement with his wife, Kathy, that she would give him 3 years to have an extremely hectic schedule. But he said, after 3 years, I'm sure we'll be at a better place, and we'll be able to kind of calm down, and then we'll have a more sane, balanced life. Well, you know what happens with that. When my family, he writes, moved to New York City to start Redeemer Presbyterian Church, we knew it would be very time-consuming, especially given my tendency to overwork. He knew that, so he said 3 years. But the 3-year mark came and went, and Kathy asked me, as we agreed, to cut back on my work hours. Just a couple more months, I said. I have this and that commitment that I have to see through, just a couple more months. I kept saying that. The months flew by with no change. One day I came home from work. It was a nice day outside, and I noticed that the door to our apartment's balcony was open. Just as I was taking off my jacket, I heard a smashing noise coming from the balcony. In another couple of seconds, I heard another one. I walked out on the balcony, and to my surprise, saw Kathy sitting on the floor. She had a hammer, and next to her was a stack of our wedding china. On the ground were shards of 2 smashed saucers. What are you doing? I asked. She looked up and said, you aren't listening to me. You don't realize that if you keep working these hours, you are going to destroy this family. I don't know how to get through to you. You aren't seeing how serious this is. This is what you're doing." And she brought the hammer down on a third saucer. It splintered into pieces. I sat down trembling. I thought she had snapped. I'm listening, I said. As we talked, it became clear that she was intense and laser focused. But she was not in a rage or out of control emotionally. She spoke calmly but forcefully. Her arguments were the same as they had been for months, but I realized how deluded I had been. There would never be a convenient time to cut back. I was addicted to the level of productivity I had achieved. I had to do something. She saw me listening for the first time, and we hugged. Finally, I inquired, "When I first came out here, I thought you were having an emotional breakdown. How did you get control of yourself so fast?" With a grin, she answered, "It was no meltdown. You see those 3 saucers I smashed? I have no cups for them. The cups have been broken over the years. I had 3 saucers to spare. I'm glad you sat down before I had to break any more." Wow. First thing she said, "You're not listening to me." Have you noticed that we kind of intuitively know when someone is listening and when they're not? It actually can be a pretty simple thing for most of us. We know what it looks like when someone is listening. They have eye contact with us. Their facial expressions tell us. There is response by body language and questions that they ask. They talk with us, they feed back, they ask us further clarifying questions. They mirror what we're doing. In fact, on that issue of mirroring, don't put it up yet, Isaac, but I want to show you a picture, if I can get this to move. I want to show you a picture. It was taken just, a week and a half ago. So the Southeastern California Conference, which is, if you happen to not be a part of this confessional community, is the sisterhood of Adventist churches in this part of California. They had a required pastors' meeting. We all had to go to it. The speaker for the meeting was Todd Bolsinger. He's a professor at Fuller Theological Seminary, a professor of leadership, and I happen to have known him. He had come and spoken for an event I work with some while ago. So at one of the times when he had people breaking out for discussion, I went up on the stage just to ask him something about an upcoming event. And we ended up talking throughout the time that people were engaging with each other. I'm not sure if you all will be able to see this. But somebody on my pastoral team took a picture of us and about an hour later sent it out to the whole team. And when I looked at the picture, I thought, no wonder I felt listened to. So Isaac, can you put the picture up now? So this is a picture somebody just took with their cell phone while we were up talking. This is the picture. That's not the picture. Do we have it back there? All right, well, we'll give them a chance to see if they can get it and put it up. But the reality is, if somebody mirrors what we're doing, how we're standing, how we're engaging and communicating, our volume level, if somebody engages with that, it sends a message, you're listening to me. So in this particular picture, I'll just describe it to you in case they're having trouble back there. We are both standing in with no knowledge anybody was watching and certainly no knowledge anyone was taking a picture. We're both standing in exactly the same way. And I thought, there's a picture of mirroring. He was doing it with me. No wonder when I walked off the stage, I felt like I had been heard. So if we want to improve our communication, if we want a deeper level of intimacy, maybe the first step is simply to listen. All right, so you'll just have to take it by faith that picture would have shown you that, and we'll get the kinks worked out before the next service. So first focus, a focus on listening. Second focus, a focus on understanding. On understanding. Because you realize and I realize that just listening is not sufficient unless we understand. And that's not a given. It can be a real challenge to understand where someone else is coming from, to enter into their experience to the degree that we can know what is driving their desire to connect on this issue. If you've ever been in a place where you don't speak the language of the country and the culture around you, you know how isolating that can feel. Did it come up? All right, I see Vic pointing, so when Vic points, I'll move this. So this was the picture, simple picture of him mirroring as we stand and talk. And I was really surprised because if you'd have asked me when I walked off the stage after talking to Todd, what did he do? I would have had no idea. What do you mean, what did he do? I don't know what he did. But whatever he did left me feeling deeply hurt. So understanding. What about it? So you may have heard the story of the man who's in a hot air balloon. He's on his way to an appointment with a friend. He's late by an hour and he's lost. He reduces the heat and the balloon comes down. He's just above the landscape and he's looking for the landscape, looking for somebody who can help him. Finally, he spots a woman and he calls out to her and he says, I'm on my way to meet a friend. I promised to meet him. I'm an hour late. I don't know where I am. Can you tell me where I am? The woman looked up at him and said, yes. You're about 30 feet off the ground, hanging from a hot air balloon in a basket. You're between the 38th and the 39th parallels, longitudinally, and between the 43rd and the 45th, laterally. He said, Are you an engineer? She said, yes. Why do you ask? He said, because the information you've given me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to do with it. In fact, I feel more lost now than when I did when we started this conversation, and now I'm even later to my appointment. She says, Looks up at him, says, are you a manager? He says, yes. How did you know? She said, well, because you've made a promise you have no idea how to keep. You've risen to the level where you are by a bunch of hot air. You have people below you that you're expecting to fix your problems. You don't know where to go or how to get there. And furthermore, we've only talked for a minute and you're managing to blame it all on me. And I read that story and I thought, that describes what it's often like in trying to understand someone else, trying to connect with someone else. So the question becomes, is there something that will deepen the likelihood that understanding can happen? I'm glad you asked. So let me take you to a book called Trading Places by Les and Leslie Parrott, a Christian couple who are in the field of marriage and family therapy. They describe a scene they had before going on a television show with these words. Our viewers want to know the most important thing they can do for their marriage, the producer told us. We were sitting in plush leather chairs, sipping bottled water out of straws in the green room of the famous Harpo Studios in Chicago. Oprah is likely to ask you, the producer continued, if you could give only one suggestion to a couple for improving their marriage, what would it be? We didn't have to think twice. In fact, it wasn't the first time we'd been asked. We hear this question a lot. In nearly every interview we do on marriage, whether it's print, radio, or television, that question is predictable. Why? Probably because, regardless of the topic, we all like to get to the heart of the matter. Think about it. Wouldn't you like to know the most important thing you can do to keep your kids off drugs, to save more time, to extend your life, to make the perfect souffle, to stop global warming, to get a promotion? Whatever the topic, we like to know the one key thing. What matters most? What's the essential element, that indispensable and vital factor for success? Well, when it comes to that crucial component in a successful marriage, there's no need to guess, they write. We stand on a mountain of research and clinical expertise when we tell you the answer. In a word, it is empathy. Empathy. It's putting yourself in your partner's shoes. The happiest couples on earth are those who become adept at trading places. I love the way the writer Jess Lair puts it. Jess Lair says, empathy is your pain in my heart. Your pain in my heart. That's empathy. It is experiencing what it would be to stand in your shoes, to be in your skin, to experience this relationship from your perspective. I remember reading years ago, decades ago, I think before I ever got married, a question that has stayed with me over all these years. It was out of a stringently academic journal called The Reader's Digest. And yet it has stayed with me all these years. And the question was simply this: if you're a married person, they said, then ask this of yourself: what would it be like to be married to me? That'll keep you up at night. What would it be like to be married to me? I try not to think about that too much because it makes me, Nick says, no way. Exactly. Because it makes me want to go just love on my wife and say, I can't imagine your life. How do you do this? What would it be like to be married to me? Because what that question is driving at, it says it creates an empathy, an appreciation for the other person that predisposes us to understanding them. It puts their pain in our hearts, and it puts our feet in their shoes. Empathy. I want to understand you. So let me get a sense of what it is like to be you. Now, honestly, a lot of times this understanding can grow straight out of our listening, though it's not guaranteed. In fact, I think one of the reasons it can be hard to listen is we think we already understand the person and we already know we don't agree with them. And so we have in our minds, let me take you back to, this is probably grade school math, which was about my level, to a formula, all right? And I think the formula probably looks something like this: listening equals agreeing. Listening equals agreeing. It seems to me that a lot of us, and I'm first on the list, a lot of us have that formula in our minds. If I listen to you, that means I'm agreeing with you. But I already know, because we've done this before, that I don't agree with you. So if listening equals agreeing, I can't listen to you because I don't agree with you. And so the listening dies and the potential for understanding disappears. It evaporates. So what if we do this? If we just simply make that a different sign. Remember that sign from grade school math? Means does not equal. Listening does not equal agreeing. All it equals is listening. And what a profound difference that can make. I've thought often over the years of two incidents that happened to me early in my professional career. First one, I'd made an appointment to see the head honcho, the el jefe, the big guy, and I was scared to death. I was wet behind the ears. I was young. Anyway. So I went to see him. He had this big office. And when I say big, it was a large office. It had chairs all around the exterior because that's where he held his committee meetings. When I came in, he set me down over there, and then he went over here, and he sat down behind his desk. There was plenty of space between us. He took out a yellow legal pad and said, I just got to write a quick letter, but go ahead. He started writing a letter. And I'm like, what? He said, no, go ahead. I'm listening. He wrote a letter while I talked to him. At the end of what I said, he looked up from his letter and said, yeah, I understand, but I think we need to keep it this way. Was there anything else? And I was like, well, I guess not. I got up and I walked out, way too scared to say anything at that point in my life, but fuming inside, thinking he didn't listen to me. He didn't listen to a word I said. And I felt disrespected and demeaned, about as far as you can get from this. That was the first experience. Second experience, I'm actually going to give you the name of the person. His name was Jerry Davis. Remember Jerry? Used to be the director of the chaplain services department when I worked at the medical center. There was something going on in the office, whatever it was. Those things vanish in the midst of time. But I went in and said, Jerry, I want to talk to you about this situation. He pulled up a chair for me. We sat with no desk between us, kind of facing each other. He said, so what's going on? And I started to unpack it. He sat there and listened, looked at me, asked me some clarifying questions along the way, and made some comments, and I made some comments. And by the end of our conversation, he said to me, I think I understand where you're coming from, but because of A, B, and C, we're going to need to keep it this way. I know that's disappointing, but yeah, that's what it's going to need to be. I can still remember walking out of that office. I wasn't excited that he hadn't agreed with me. I was wishing he would have agreed with me. But I felt understood. I had been heard. And it was one of those moments in my relationship with Jerry when our relationship deepened because he had the respect to listen and to make sure he understood me. That's why I want to read you this proverb. This is our proverb for understanding. Proverbs 18:2. Fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. Now that's true in all kinds of areas of life. It's certainly true in relationships. Fools have no interest in understanding. I already know what you're going to say. I already know what you're talking about. I don't want to hear it. And Solomon, the wise man, has a word for that. His word is this: fool. You have no interest in understanding. So if we want to truly experience intimacy, communication is probably the best reality in our relationship to develop. And if we want to develop that, we need to focus on listening, focus on understanding, and then thirdly, finally, focus on responding. Focus on responding. So listen to this Proverbs, also out of Proverbs 18. This is from the Message paraphrase. I love this paraphrase of what the wise man was saying. Words kill. Words give life. Either poison or fruit. You choose. Pretty good, isn't it? Words kill. Words give life. Either poison or fruit. You choose. What the wise man is saying is there is a result to what you say. There is a response that grows out of it. It's going to either build your life or destroy your life, deepen your relationship or wound it. Poison or fruit? What's it going to be? So Dennis Guernsey, the late Dennis Guernsey, in his book, it's been around now for years, good little book called The Family Covenant. It's been very helpful to me, Love and Forgiveness in the Christian Home. Says this to parents, but a principle that I think will apply in all of the relationships of family. The phenomenon of listening is at the heart of a critical matter for Christian parents, the issue of obedience. As Christian parents, we recognize the need for our children to learn obedience, but often they learn the opposite. The etymology of the Greek word to obey provides a clue to the problem. The root of the word obey in the Greek New Testament is to listen. Okay, so the Greek word obey has its roots in the word listen. Guernsey continues. It's the same root that we find in acoustic, such as acoustic guitars or acoustic ceilings. To obey means to listen and respond. How can we get them to listen? Probably they will listen, meaning our kids. Probably they will listen if they have been listened to. In this sense, listening is a vital dimension in the context of parenting. Parents usually respond at this point with fear. What if they become permissive and compliant? In other words, what if I give in too much? Admittedly, I risk being a soft touch and a pushover. But the greater issue to me, says Guernsey, is hearing and being heard. I'm willing to trade an occasional incident in which I'm manipulated for the time when the chips are down and my children listen to what I have to say and respond appropriately. In covenant families, the family members hear and are heard by one another. So, the connection linguistically is clear between listen and obey. I can tell you when I was a young father, one of the things I learned, simple lesson, but yeah, our family is loving, but not always as bright as their dad anyway. So one of the things I learned, took me a while to learn it, but when I learned it, it made a big difference, was when those moments came when I needed Austin or I needed Miranda to do something. The battle was half over or more if I could get them to stop what they were doing and look at me in the eyes. If I could say to them, this is what I need. This is what we need to do. And if I could get that sense, they're tracking with me, Brett. They're looking me in the eye, and they say, yes, Daddy, or no, Daddy, or whatever. Half the battle was over. Because to listen was to obey. Or if we're talking about adult relationships, to listen is to respond. There are many times when spouses will say to the other, you're not listening to me. And yet the other spouse can repeat back word for word what they just said. Which has left me wondering, when they say, you're not listening to me, if what they mean isn't, I see no evidence that this has made any difference in you. I've had more than a few couples in which I've discovered something curious. This may be just me. I'm not making a blanket statement for all of counseling, but something curious. I have concluded that when a husband and wife are struggling, the wife is usually much more accurate in her assessment of the situation. In fact, I can tell you, I'm remembering distinctly one couple right now. He called me in a panic. Can you talk to my wife? What happened? She's leaving me. Okay, well, what happened? Well, I didn't do this, and she blew up, and she's walking out the door. I sat down and talked with the wife. You know what she said to me? I have been saying this for years. Year after year after year, he's not listening. And it wasn't till I packed my suitcase and said, I'm leaving, that he suddenly wanted to hear what I had to say. So how did she know he wasn't listening? Because there was no response, no change. If we put it in the language of parent and child, there was no obedience. If we put it in the language of adult to adult, there was no response appropriate to the situation being discussed. Now, we start out with intimacy. We want intimate relationships. We're wired for intimacy. How do we deepen it? How do we grow it? Well, one of the best ways is by communicating more deeply and more effectively. How do we do that? Well, let's focus on listening, on understanding, on responding. Now, it's tough because we live in a world of such distraction that people have a very hard time stopping to listen. So I read just this last week, actually in a Reformed Christian journal, an idea that the author had. He said, here's what I want to suggest, because our phones have become such an issue that we can't even talk. He said, next time you go out to eat with friends, make a phone stack on the table. In the restaurant, a phone stack. The first one to answer a ding, a ring, or anything else pays the bill. Just make a phone stack. Or he says, if you're at home, make the same phone stack. The first one to answer does the dishes. Because, he said, it will free us to connect, to engage, to listen. So I have an assignment for you this week. We've been trying to do an assignment each week. Here's my assignment. This week, find somebody important in your life. Could be a good friend, could be a sibling, a parent, a child, could be a spouse. Find somebody in your life with whom you can spend 1 hour of time in conversation. Phone in the stack, focused on, listening to, understanding, and responding to. Now, maybe you say, like in a marriage, we don't have anything to talk about. So here's a great little book by Les and Leslie Parrott called Love Talk Starters. Love Talk Starters. All it is questions. 275 questions. So if you don't know what to talk about, just open the book and ask a question. Like, here's one. Simone Signoret once said, chains do not hold a marriage together. It is threads. Hundreds of tiny threads which sew people together through the years. What tiny threads have woven us together this week? Great question to talk about. What about this one? If the phone rang and God was on the line calling just to check in, what would you say? And why? How about this one? If you were a pastor and were going to preach a sermon on marriage, what topic would you choose? Just talk. Spend an hour. Listen. Seek to understand empathetically, and then do something about what you learned. And your intimacy will deepen, and your relationship will grow. God bless you.
His presence is here with us.
Oh, to Jesus I surrender all. To Him I freely. Oh,
Sing that verse one more time.
oh, all to and I will ever love and trust in His presence daily live. Oh, I surrender all. Oh, I surrender all. And all to Thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. Oh, all to Jesus I surrender all. To Him I. If you have a voice, love in His presence, Him I will daily lay. Oh, I surrender all. Oh, I surrender all. In all to Thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all.
Maybe you're here and you haven't yet turned your heart towards Jesus. I just invite you to take this moment to turn your heart toward Him. His love, His mercy, His grace. Just the voices.